Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks very much. I'd like to bring up my first speaker. Mark Pirtle is our cameraman and the outreach production manager for the Houston media source. Mark and I have been in touch many times over the years, and I've been down to his studio once or twice. And when he called me up and mentioned that he could put us on the air again, I mentioned my presentation this Friday. He got intrigued and decided he wanted to capture it on film. So I'm going to let Mark tell you about what he does and what he expects to happen with what he films today. Mark?
Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Mark Pirtle. I've worked at the Public Access Channel in Houston, Texas for 24 years. I remember you, Mr. Hutzelman. My job is outreach, and there's two ideas about public access. One is that it's libertarian. Anyone who throws a video over the transom, we air within the constraints of our rules. We have non-commercial rules. And the other idea is community access, and that is I go out and I try to get stuff that represents Houston, you know, ethnographic and culturally and politically and geographically diverse. I try to get as much as I can, and I try to attract people to using the channel. It's a place, it was created out of the, when they were doing rulemaking for what would be the public interest obligation of cable. Cable travels through your public utility easement. That's public property. And so it's a channel so that you get to have free speech on the cable system that travels through your backyard. And our job is to keep the equipment running, and your job is to engage your neighbors and have free speech on that channel. Thank you for letting me speak. And this will be on channel 17, 99 on UVerse, and Barry will forward the times. Thank you for letting me speak to you all today.
Thank you. Okay.
Microphone, please.
Oh, microphone, please. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see now. Tomorrow I'm going to be going up to Cedar Springs, I think it is, a little bit west of Bastrop for a meeting which includes people from the free market community as well as the progressive environmentalist community to talk about water policies in Texas. It's titled the Conference on the Water Wars of the State. And of course I'll be going up with some of my free market literature to help share the ideas that come out of the free market community about how the difficult problem of a resource held in common, which is water, can be dealt with, and so we get a proper allocation of a very critical resource. Now, I think I gave most of you a copy of a little booklet that Rob is featured in. Our speaker today, of course, is Rob Bradley, and it's titled Corporate Social Responsibility and Energy, Lessons from Enron. Of course, one of Rob's claims of fame is that he once worked for Enron and was summarily dismissed, I think it was, in December of 2001, along with hundreds of other employees. You probably all recall those scenes on television when they're all suddenly emptying the office building and putting their personal goods into their cars because the company was finally going into its final tailspin and collapsing upon itself. So Rob has drawn upon that experience to I'm sorry?
There's actually a PA that's, my system is for me, there's a house PA that's down there somewhere.
All right.
I don't know how it works.
Okay, is that a little better? That sounds better to me. Okay. And so Rob was among those Enron employees that were summarily told to leave the building. And that was, I think, December 2001. And since then, he's drawn upon his years of research up to that date and his experiences with Enron and the times hence to inform his critique of modern American business policies and techniques and practices. But that won't be his topic today. He'll be talking about something new that he's doing regarding problems with American education. Now, I passed out to you a new handout. It's dated today. It's my first time I've taken it public on an option that we have as small government activists and under Texas law to do one-day petition drives to put charter amendments on the ballots of any city in Texas. But it's really only possible in small cities where a handful of dedicated activists can actually get enough signatures in one day to put a policy change on the ballot. And I explained in the handout how you could actually take that into a county level politics, though there are not charters in that case. You can all look at that later to see what I'm talking about. Now, getting back to this little booklet here, if you look in the back, you'll get a summary of Rob's history. So I'm not going to go into any great detail. I will say that he works with the Cato Institute as an adjunct scholar. He has a doctorate in economics. When he was working for Enron, part of his job was to be a speechwriter for Ken Lay. And I gather from what Rob has published is that there were sometimes attempts to criticize Rob within the agency, and that Ken Lay may have protected him from some, then not the agency, but the firm, and that Ken Lay took some steps to protect Rob from some of that criticism. And I'm hoping that Rob will talk to us today a bit about his work in energy, because we have the terrible events happening in Japan. I know that my thoughts are very much consumed with that now, as well as my heart is going out to those brave men who are trying to dampen the fires in the reactors. And the whole issue of whether nuclear energy is an alternative is very much, I think, something that Rob thinks about. And among the places that Rob has given talks to in the past, and I noticed that our group's name is not here, Rob. I'm shocked to see that. But among them are the College of Charleston, the University of Belgrano in Argentina, George Mason University, Houston Baptist, University of Houston, at a couple of the campuses, Loyola University, New York University, Rice, and Texas A&M, among others. So, without going into any further detail, I think I'll bring up Rob. And again, I ask that you let Rob make his presentation, and then we'll go into the formal Q&A. I thank you very much. Rob Bradley.
Okay, reading glasses, where'd they go?
Reading glasses, how'd you take one?
Reading glasses.
In your pocket?
In my coat pocket. This is on TV, this is great.
You might need to lift up that microphone a little bit. What power
Okay.
glasses do you use?
Okay, our microphone fixed, we need to find the man's glasses. What power?
When in doubt, check your pockets.
All right.
Always look in the most obvious place. Okay, well, thank you, Barry. It's good to be here. My talk today is not on energy, which is a bit of a deviation for me, but it's on intellectual diversity. And I think it's a very strong argument that those with opposite points of view from the left can use against the left, because the left has captured and used a term for diversity in all sorts of areas, except there's one area that they just don't like, and that is intellectual diversity. If I was to summarize the situation today at a lot of the elite high schools here in Houston, and certainly the boarding schools and the schools in the Northeast, and probably around the country, public schools too, it's like they're all NPR and no Fox News. There's not a distinguished faculty member in a number of our schools, including Kincaid, that is an expert in, much less a champion of, what I call the science of liberty. And are these bad people? No. Chances are, when they got their college education, and some of them got their graduate education, their teachers, their textbooks, did not include the science of liberty. And we have a lot of work to do here. There was a visit a couple of weeks ago by Marty Zupan, the head of the Institute for Humane Studies at George Mason University. And their mission is to educate top college and university students over the summer on the science of liberty. They put over 1,000 students through their programs each year. A number of these students have gone on to become tenured faculty, and they're working it up. And their goal in the next 5 or so years is to achieve a rate in colleges and universities of 10% of the faculty being freedom friendly. Okay? That's a 1 in 10. Right now, what might the percent be? 1 or 2%, 3%, 4% maybe? So there's a lot of work to be done here. And if you look at my slide, Kincaid is certainly a school at issue, but there's an analogous situation in some respects, at least on the political front, at the other top private schools in the area, including St. John's Episcopal and others. So please don't think that this talk is directed at Kincaid. The alumni are very concerned about the reputation of the school. Kincaid is a great school. There's alumni that are that are very interested in the science of liberty, and they watch Fox News, a fair number of them, and they know they have a problem at Kincaid, but it's going to take a lot of time to address. But what I would like to do by giving this talk to you and perhaps being on TV is to present a message to the students of Kincaid, St. John's Episcopal, and the rest of the schools, to the parents, and to the trustees that there's a problem here with the existing faculty, and I hope the existing faculty of these schools will watch this as well, where they will be challenged in a very open, scholarly way to start reading books that they disagree with. Now it's what a lot of us do, and we have to break the habit, is we read books of people we agree with, and we learn about our opponents through reading the books of people we agree with. For example, if you're a Malthusian and in the camp of Paul Ehrlich and John Holdren, and you believe that the climate is in crisis, the environment is in crisis, don't understand the opposing views of a Julian Simon through those books. A copy of the Ultimate Resource 2 and go through it. And I'll talk a little bit more about Julian Simon here in a minute, but Simon was someone who was a Malthusian. He was completely on the other side, and he looked at the evidence and changed his mind. Okay, Rob Bradley. Yeah, I did work at Enron. Yes, I worked there for 16 years. I'm one of the smartest guys in the room, but I always like to begin my presentations with a little bit of humility. Every time I start thinking I'm a big shot, something bad happens. And I'm superstitious, so I'm going to have a little humility here. If you look at the brain size of the average Obama advisor versus Rob Bradley, you'll see that there's quite a difference, but I work harder. And maybe my worldview is better. Hey, if you have a good worldview, you don't have to be as smart as the guy or gal on the opposite side that might have the wrong worldview. I did work at Enron. Did I drink the Kool-Aid there as Ken Lay speechwriter?
Yes.
Yes, there I am. I was part of the mass layoff, and I can say this was December 2nd, 2001, and I can say on that day the Houston and national economy became more efficient, getting a lot of us that were doing the wrong things back in the workforce so we could be doing better things. Ken Lay sends me a little note. Rob, please take a look at this and see if it makes any sense. I've been trying to figure it out ever since. But I was part of the mass layoff, and me and a number of my friends, we lost just about everything. Now, I put down the binoculars back there. You don't want to see that again, you're going to have to pay for it. Okay. Okay, so my association with Kincaid, I attended Kincaid K through 12th. When I first entered, I was one of the smart people in the class. By the time I got out, I was in the bottom quartile, but that's another story. what happened was in these private schools is every year they knock a few out that aren't making the grades, and the ones coming in are national merit scholars. So, you know, and someone's got to be on the far end of the curve. Why not me? And what's really interesting is in the early 70s, my sophomore, junior, senior year at Kincaid, there was a group of top students who were studying the science of liberty that had books by Ludwig von Mises and Murray Rothbard, and were talking it up. And they would raise their hand in the history class of John Gurman, who is retiring, I think, this year. And he was right out of Rice, and like just about everyone, he espoused the positions, the points of view of his professors at Rice, and it was that the Great Depression, the artificial boom of the 20s was caused by capitalist speculation, and we went into a depression, and the New Deal was, FDR's New Deal was the appropriate response to cure some of the excesses of capitalism. The story is exactly opposite, and I remember in Murray Rothbard's America's Great Depression, my old friends Mark Steiner and others would raise their hands and say, well, wasn't, you know, the Federal Reserve Bank that was founded in 1913, weren't they really inflating the money supply like crazy during the 1920s? It led to the artificial boom. And when the bust hit, didn't Herbert Hoover impose a tariff, run deficits, increase taxes that kept us in the Depression? And didn't FDR do all the wrong things to keep us in the Depression? A completely different point of view back then. And here we are today with Obama's New Deal. And because so many people didn't learn the lessons of the New Deal, we have had Obama's stimulus, which has been compared to taking water out of the shallow end of a pool and putting it on the deep end of the pool to think you're going to make things better. Or maybe the opposite, maybe deep end to shallow end. I was introduced to libertarianism at Kincaid, and I thought it was great. These were the top students. They were challenging the professor, and you know, I wasn't one of the top students, but I thought it was great. And I have a little history here. My father went to Kincaid at the original location, and my two children graduated from Kincaid. But maybe as important or more important than everything else, I taught interim term, a 3-week class at Kincaid for 5 years. The first class was on the lessons from Enron, and the other 4 classes were an introduction to free market capitalism, deep capitalism, business and economics, something the kids don't get at Kincaid. They don't have a required course in business or economics at Kincaid, and it might be the same way at St. John's and other schools. And if you don't understand business and economics, you don't have a world view of the political world, whether your view is right or wrong. It's a huge gap in the curriculum. And I met with one of the prominent trustees of Kincaid, who's retired now from the board, but he was shocked that there wasn't a business and economics course at Kincaid. Well, there I am. I was voted by my classmates in 1973 least likely to succeed. And Barry, here I am at HPRA. You asked why I didn't have it down. You know, no, just kidding. Barry, the list you had were colleges and universities. I have HPRA on another list. Yeah, it's in appendix, appendix A. No, I'm just kidding. So here I am. I had a little trouble spelling my last name there. I never knew whether my last name had a E, but it does. There was a controversy at Kincaid, which was the straw that broke the camel's back. A lot of problems at Kincaid, but a lot of parents kind of suffering through it, kids suffering through it because they're scared of the faculty. Because if you come out hard against the faculty, you might not get you might get a bad grade in the course. You might not get a faculty recommendation for college, or you don't know what the person's going to put down. And there's and the faculty at Kincaid is very aligned. A lot of them think alike. There's groupthink, and this is very bad because you need competition on a faculty with ideas as much as you need competition in an economy. For various reasons, there was a real chokehold from key members of the high school faculty that suppressed dissent. But they went too far when there was a pep rally before the championship game, football game, where a skit involving Kincaid football players dressing as the opposing team's cheerleaders got canceled at the last minute. A shout from the back, from the upper school principal, because a couple of teachers and maybe one or more students complained that this was, quote, negative gender stereotyping. And that was a little too much for the parents. It led to Skip McGee's long letter where he went into a lot of other issues that had been boiling over. He sent it to the Board of Trustees and his friends over the internet, not friends, but other parents. Parents sent it to other, and it was a private letter read literally around the world. There was articles on the front page of the Houston Chronicle, one article in the Houston Chronicle on it, and there was articles in newspapers in the UK, because the author, Skip McGee, is a very top investment banker. But the three issues he brought up, one was a religious issue at Kincaid. If you wanted to have a meeting on, a Bible study or something, you had to go to the stands of the football field to have that meeting. Sex education, a lot of education on alternative lifestyles here, and it sort of got to the point where it became a cause celeb of one of the teachers in particular, where you have stickers that say this, and they have posters, and it was just there was a lot going on. And then the third thing that was in the McGee letter was that the political views of the faculty, which are kind of Obama left, New Deal left, were being espoused in the classroom. So three big issues there. Now the McGee letter was quoted in the Texas Monthly article from an issue or two ago, but the Texas Monthly article is just a classic case of bias, where the writer takes certain quotations and leaves out other quotations that would provide context. And it really inflames me a little bit because there's a prominent writer with Texas Monthly, I'm not going to mention her name, that wrote one of the Enron books, okay, how Enron was deceitful. Well, you look at a number of the politically charged articles in Texas Monthly, and there's every bit as much deceit in those articles as was practiced back at Enron. But of course, they hate Enron. Enron was a failure of capitalism. It really wasn't. It was political capitalism, not capitalism, but that's another talk. But one quote from the McGee letter that I think is absolutely essential for context that Texas Monthly didn't touch was the third one here. What happened to our ability to laugh at ourselves and have fun? What happened to common sense and good judgment? Stop throwing this stuff down my throat about gays and lesbians and political correctness and the rest of it. These issues are very sensitive. I think common sense would say that if there's a student that's being harassed or made fun of because of sexual orientation or anything else, maybe they're in a narco-capitalist or something, that this can be dealt with under the general rules of the school against harassment and the rest of it. Now, Kincaid reforms. This letter came out in 2009, and they had a report. They had a task force, spent a lot of money with consultants, and the final report is very watered down, but basically it says that now you can have religious meetings on campus subject to certain common sense rules. Sex education is going to be de-emphasized, that it's more an at-home issue than it is a Kincaid issue. I think that makes sense. But the third issue that was addressed, it basically says teachers are discouraged from expressing their own political views in the classroom. But let's think about that a little bit. Now, here's the exact language in the report. Kincaid teachers are passionate and value their independence, but that independence rests on trust, a trust that teachers will not use their classroom as a vehicle to promote their own political views. Okay, I like that. The second part. Faculty members will teach course material in a way that covers the curriculum in a thorough, balanced, age-appropriate, and well-reasoned manner that promotes critical thinking. Faculty members should encourage students to explore their own ideas and respectfully discuss opposing ideas. Faculty members should not use the classroom to advocate personal political views. Well, that all sounds great, but what if you have a teacher who, you get to the section in American history where the Federal Reserve Bank was created in 1913, and the teacher doesn't understand the arguments for either a gold standard or competing currencies. A number of very top economists today argue these points. There's a long tradition, but if you don't have a sophisticated knowledge of the alternatives to central banking, then the teacher's not going to teach it because he or she doesn't understand it and might not agree with it. Maybe they read something about our gold standard. Oh, that led to all these problems. We needed a central bank. He or she could have a very unsophisticated view. So it's not necessarily, so the teachers are going to think, oh, I'm being fair. How can you teach what you don't know? And the kids don't know what they're missing. And there's a trustee told me that there's a very important teacher, high school teacher at Kincaid, and one week his son thought the teacher was liberal, and the next week thought the teacher was conservative. Well, that's interesting, but if you're not espousing a sophisticated view of the science of liberty, you might be missing arguments here that you don't even know are conservative or libertarian or Tea Party type. So this is a real problem that Kincaid and a lot of schools have, is not having a teacher with expertise in the science of liberty. And I've been studying this tradition for decades, and it's a sophisticated tradition, but it's an understandable tradition. I mentioned the Texas Monthly article here. Makes some very interesting points worth reading, but there's clever ways that the writer obscures the real issues by leaving out quotes for context, by using quotations for the kind of right-wing terms but not the left-wing terms. Negative gender stereotyping. He mentions that in here, but there's no quotations around it. Would you put quotations around that? What in the heck? Negative gender stereotyping. What does that mean? Social corporate responsibility. Social justice. I'd put quotations around those type things. But most of all, the reader ignores the lack of intellectual diversity problem at Kincaid, but this was implicit in the McGee letter. It wasn't explicit. I use this term science of liberty. I was meeting with the headmaster and some trustees, and the headmaster said, and it's a very fair statement, what is the science of liberty? And that's a term I'm using a lot now that I didn't use a year or two ago. And I think it's fascinating because there's a real world view here, and I think if you understand sort of the macro view versus all the pieces that we deal with on a day-to-day basis where government intervention is hurting us, it gives you a new perspective. Certainly at the heart of the science of liberty is free market economics, the Austrian school with Ludwig von Mises, and I'll talk a little bit more about the central concept of free market economics. Objectivism and Ayn Rand. I was into objectivism and Rand, left her completely, felt like, it's not for me. And I came back toward objectivism, and that was the only way I could understand Ken Lay, who was a very complex figure. Understand him as a philosophical fraud versus engaging in fraud that's prosecutable. And the philosophy of objectivism, just like Austrian School of Free Market Economics, helps me to understand the world. And I think there's objectivism isn't a rigid closed doctrine, as some espouse. I think it's a starting point for a lot of very interesting discussions. And by the way, the Atlas Shrugged movie is coming out on Tax Day next month. Hollywood doesn't like it, but we'll see if America likes it. Ultimate resource theory. Ooh, Julian Simon. To me, Julian Simon kind of put it together as far as free market economics and objectivism and the human potential. Simon began as a Malthusian. More people, more problems. He looks at all the data in a free society. He says, hold on here. More people, more resources, less pollution, better virtually everything. Where human beings, because of human ingenuity, aren't the problem, they're the solution. And F.A. Hayek, very famous economist in the Austrian tradition, read Simon's book, The Ultimate Resource, that came out in 1981. And he wrote a fan letter to Simon. Wow, you put it all together. That's high praise indeed. Now, you can even get beyond Austrian economics, objectivism, ultimate resource theory, and there's a person in the room here who I'm going to, he's the one that puts it all together, especially down at Pirate Speech with martinis, and I'm talking about none other than David Hutzelman. Let's give David Hutzelman a applause. Now, David over here, I did this last time, my last presentation, and David got a girlfriend, Anna, because of it. So, something good's going to happen to him. But heck, talking to David down in Galveston, and somehow it all comes together. Some good hospitality there. The science of liberty. I'm going to go back because I want to look at Hutzelman. He was a little younger there. I'd rather look at, y'all look at the screen, don't look at David here. But if I ask you, what is the essence of the science of liberty? What would be your response? Anyone have a short response? What's the most important thing? Monopoly. Anybody else? Yes. Okay. Yes, sir.
Hands off.
Hands off. Barry.
I think if you look at examples, were market failure.
Market failure.
Purported to be.
Okay.
Success and non-success.
I would say those are all corollaries, but I'm going to say that the essence, the foundation of the science of liberty is undesigned order, spontaneous order, the results of human action and not of human design. And what I mean by that is under private property and voluntary exchange, there's a wider good that comes from our self-interested action. We're going back to Adam Smith's invisible hand, but the modern restatements and elaborations of that really help us today. Can you, an example of the science of liberty, can you imagine what it would be like if Houston had a Department of Restaurants and made all the decisions on what, when, and where? Can you imagine the chaos and the inefficiency and the politicization? Barry, you would be having an HPR meeting on we don't have enough Mexican restaurants compared to French restaurants, but you go on and on. Undesigned order, and the kids, normally you would think you got a problem, pass a law. And that's the easy way to think of something. And that's why so many people are interventionists, is the idea of undesigned order is, it takes a lot more thought and understanding than it does the knee-jerk, there's a problem, there should be more government. Whether there's too many people cussing at a public place or there's, not enough education or whatever. Undesigned order. And think of it also in terms of language, customs, morals, money, all the things that we take for granted, and certainly the economy, that are the results of human action, but not of human design. And F.A. Hayek wrote a piece in 1946, and my latest issue of the American Economic Review called it one of the top 20 economic articles of the last century, and maybe it should be number one, called The Use of Knowledge in Society, where he said that the knowledge for economic efficiency and all the things we want does not exist in whole form, but only in dispersed pieces of information that all of us have. Now, how does all this dispersed, often contradictory and inarticulate knowledge come into play to create a macroeconomic order with the economy? And it's through the price system. Prices, every price contains, you can have a price for apples of $2 a pound at Rice, and if you want to, you can hire some academics that could write a big treatise, one on supply and one on demand, to explain that $2 price. But we don't have to do that. That reflects all of our knowledge as buyers and sellers, and that these individual prices sufficiently overlap where the knowledge becomes whole. But there is not a whole knowledge that Obama's smartest people can figure out in order to implement efficiency. That the knowledge of economic efficiency doesn't exist in whole form, but only in bits and pieces of information that individuals have, and the price system and profit loss entrepreneurship creates a undesigned order overall. So to me, the basis of the science of liberty is unplanned order, and there's a lot to discuss there. You get into market failure, but you also get into something called government failure. I looked at the textbook used in the government classes at Kincaid. We the people. Government's efficient. It's us. Look in the index. Is there the term, they have log rolling, which is where you have different legislation that's unrelated, but it all comes together and they vote on it. Well, obviously that's inefficient government. But they don't have the term government failure. Market failure, everyone talks about that. Government failure, finally, it's entered into the economic mainstream, but it hadn't hit a lot of textbooks. But what this does with the science of liberty, it gives you a worldview to understand the world. You understand the Great Depression and the New Deal, which had never happened before in the United States, and you're understanding what we're going through today, both the artificial boom that was largely the result of government intervention, whether it's subprime loans or it's inflation by the Federal Reserve Bank, and the inability of the stimulus, the $786 billion stimulus, that money spent, it's gone. Okay, you want to do it again? Why did that fail? And obviously the answer is government creates bubble jobs. Okay, let me try to conclude here. Now the opposite, like you can understand how a government intervention makes things worse rather than better, like a price control, rent controls. You remember the gasoline lines of the 1970s? You want a shortage? You want to put us in line? You want to make us mad at each other? All you need to do is put on a government price control. You can understand the little bits, the problems, but when you start seeing a lot of government intervention that has unintended consequences, that sort of leads you to the opposite understanding of undesigned order. And I remember exactly where I was when I was in college, where I sort of went from Ludwig von Mises and understanding the problems of government intervention to F.A. Hayek and sort of the worldview of spontaneous order, because they both go together. And the chaotic nature of government intervention all the way to socialism, if we have restaurant socialism here in Houston or if we have socialism across a whole country. It's a way to understand the world. And the kids that I taught at Kincaid introduced the idea of having a worldview. Woo, a worldview. What's that? Well, it's a general understanding that, of course, you need to challenge, but when you're reading a newspaper or watching the news, you're seeing things, you're able to classify it and make sense of it. And that's what a good understanding of economics philosophy from the science of liberty gives you. Simple rules for a complex world. Richard Epstein. This is in the spontaneous order, undesigned order tradition. The more regulations you want, including the big stack of accounting regulations that Enron gamed to death, the more problems that you'll Government intervention. This is a schematic showing how government intervention expands from its own shortcomings. Political capitalism versus free market capitalism. A very key distinction. So you can interpret the robber baron era, or you can interpret events in the business world today. You don't want to say that just business is good. You want to say, well, are businesses making their profits from voluntary consumer decisions, or are they making their profits from special government favor? Every one of Enron's profit centers had something to do with special government failure. Ken Lay was a PhD economist with lots of Washington experience. How did he get on top of an energy company like Enron? Over at Exxon, it's engineers that get to the top. How did Ken Lay get to the top? And that is because of the mixed economy. Enron was not a refutation of the invisible hand like so many have argued, including Paul Krugman of the New York Times. It was an indictment of the political side of political capitalism. Thomas Kuhn here had the idea of a paradigm shift where there's so many anomalies with the mainstream view that it just cracks open. I think that's happening today with the left and the New Deal, the Obama administration, where you have a Tea Party movement, people just waking up, coming out of the woodworks, going, something is real wrong here. And I think there's a intellectual crisis on the left, and I'm not saying the right has it all right. I don't vote Republican, and I don't vote Democrat. I have problems with both parties, personally. But I think we're at a turning point here where we not only need to take back our country, but we need to, quote, take back our schools. A couple things, and I'm just about done. Charles Koch, and you're hearing a lot about Koch Industries. The left is trying to demonize the Tea Party types and everything on the right through Koch Industries. Charles Koch has been espousing these ideas for 4 decades. He is responsible for my intellectual development since the 70s. He is the opposite of a Ken Lay or a political capitalist. And he wrote a book called The Science of Success, where he gets from basic free market principles to good business management. It's a great book. He goes from the science of liberty to the science of success. And I think it's a great new way for these ideas to get into the mainstream. And from that, you get the heroic corporation being a free market corporation. Okay, what do we do today? What do I advise to the Kincaid headmaster, to the board of trustees, and what do I alert parents and students about? There's a real problem today on your faculty, and this is a problem on faculties all over the place, not only Kincaid. With the existing faculty, there should be a challenge culture implemented from the top down and from the bottom up, from the students raising their hands and asking questions, where the teacher, the faculty members in the core courses of government and history, particularly in the upper school level, feel like they need to spend some of their summers reading key books from the science of liberty. I think it would be great for these schools to have an intellectual diversity training program where, and we can find funding for this, bring in top thinkers and get these faculty off-site somewhere. They don't have to agree with everything they're listening to, but they've got to understand it on a very sophisticated level. And so a faculty member needs to feel pressured from the students up and from the headmaster, trustees down, know your stuff, because there's too many instances that the faculty members just don't have a good understanding of business economics, social sciences, or the science of liberty. There's a huge curriculum gap I mentioned earlier at Kincaid and a lot of other schools where the kids really don't get a sophisticated understanding of business economics, and certainly not the science of liberty. I'm not talking about a business course where they teach you how to trade stocks. I'm talking about a business course that talks about profit loss entrepreneurship and gets into ideas such as creative destruction, so-called market failure, government failure, the good versus bad business, free market capitalism versus political capitalism, and the rest of it. I think the ultimate reform is that faculties need to hire an expert, someone coming out of the tradition of the science of liberty, to teach government and history classes. Even if you get one faculty member, the very fact that the students in his or her classes are hearing these ideas means that the other teachers teaching classes, maybe from a different perspective, knows the students are listening to or in the other class. So they say, well, Mr. Bradley would say, well, that's a great start. There you're having the power of opposites. And the kids can really understand these ideas if they understand that there's a lot of conflict and smart people are thinking on both sides of the issue. The power of opposites can make something mundane very exciting. That's what I found from teaching my classes at Kincaid. Conclusion. Skip McGee himself wishes this would go away. Maybe he wishes I wasn't even mentioning his name on public access TV. I would argue that Skip McGee is a hero. He should be applauded for his courage at Kincaid, and what's happened with Kincaid that's gotten national and international attention is leading to a national effort at other private schools. I have been communicated by, I've been sent an email from the assistant headmaster of another private school in another big city. We got the same problem. We're going to address it. And my article has received a lot of attention. So what Skip McGee has done at Kincaid, I think, is sort of part of the intellectual Tea Party movement that is going to gather a lot of steam. We have to fight for educational balance. It's barely started. We need to get the existing faculty thinking in terms of a challenge culture, and we need new hires that are schooled in this area. And with intellectual diversity, finally, I think that's an argument that gives us a moral high ground, even among the left. I think even those on the left should applaud the idea of having diversity in thought, just like they and we like diversity in so many other areas of our life. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. Yes, sir.
I get two. One, you mentioned the central bank, so that we should do away with that. What is it should replace the central bank? That's one. The other one is nobody really understands economics. It's such abstract, and I'm dealing with a lot of people. If you expect teachers to be able to understand it, with most people, their professionals don't really agree.
Okay. On alternatives to the central bank, Barry, that would be its own session. There's different points of view within the libertarian community. A Murray Rothbard would have a gold standard where the warehouses holding the golds that are issuing the paper, they would be under a requirement to have 100% backing for that. But others will say, oh, let the market decide. We could have fractional reserve banking. We could have competing currencies where American Express comes out with the currency. Lots of ideas there. Now, your second point on sophistication. Look, the folks that are listening that love NPR and love the New York Times, they're the smartest guys in the room. They can understand the science of liberty if they want to. Another question. Garth.
Yes, I was 4 classes ahead of you in Kincaid, and I never did discover the libertarian group, or wasn't around in the late '60s. I'd like to discover. I didn't discover it until college, but I was rebuffed by German 5 or 10 years ago. I tried to turn him on to something free market, economic oriented, and I was rebuffed by German. That pissed me off.
John
German, yeah, at Kincaid. I sent recently, tried to find the email addresses on the Kincaid website of the deans. I wanted to challenge them to say that in their college counseling they should have an ISI, Intercollegiate Studies Institute, college guidebook as a Bible, along with the Princeton Review and all the other U.S. News reviews of colleges that really tell you the truth about colleges. But I didn't find out. In college, I discovered Friedman, and it wasn't until after college that I discovered Hayek and Mises and the rest. So this definitely needs to get down on a lower level.
Right.
Oh, the last thing was, I'll pass 2 copies around. I'll speak with you about this later. This is a very potent weapon we can use. David Horowitz's academic Bill of Rights. You've heard of that, and I'll discuss that with you.
Okay. Well, Garth Whittington, you went to Kincaid. You graduated in what year? 69. Okay. There was a Robert Campbell, who's now a professor at Clemson, who was and is very libertarian. He was 2 years ahead of me, so you missed us just by a couple of years. He graduated in 70, I think. Was there another specific question there? Or let me go to the next question. Yes, ma'am.
You've discussed your economic sources or inspirations, but where would you describe your philosophical roots? Plato, Christianity, Judaism, atheism, Marxism? And how do the Bushies figure into this?
The Bushes?
The Bushies.
Bushes.
They went to Kincaid. Didn't they?
Yeah.
I just want to know what the philosophical
Okay.
roots are. I'm not talking
All
about
right.
economic, philosophical,
Okay.
and how do the Bushes, would they agree with you on this? 'Cause they had
Okay.
some-
I was very interested in Ayn Rand, so I was just doctrinaire. You know, you can't initiate force against someone, you're wrong, you know. But then I went to free market economics, which is basically utilitarian, meaning greatest good, greatest number. You like the free market because you get more and better toilets, you know, and everything else. So there's no religion back there, and in everything I write, you have no idea what my religious perspective is. So I think the science of liberty does not necessarily have to rest on on religion or a particular view. Now, there's a lot in the conservative movement that would say we have to have a very strong faith so that people act right under liberty and the rest of it. And I'm not so sure about that, but that's not a debate I have expertise in. Neil Bush was in my class for a while. He got me in trouble one time because we were both giggling. But he left early. Jeb Bush, a lot of the Bushes attended Kincaid, but then they left to go to boarding schools, I think. So I don't have any particular knowledge of them at Kincaid.
You asked earlier about what you mean or what you think about the science of liberty. My answer was, for me, it's a study of the isms. Capitalism, I like to think of this in a matrix. In the bottom row, there's 4 cells in this matrix. In the bottom row is capitalism and socialism. On the top row is fascism and communism. And the science of liberty is a study of this matrix and all of the isms in there and all of the different shades in each of these 4 different cells.
Yeah. You know, another way to think of the science of liberty is that, well, like a libertarian, I'd think of myself as a small L libertarian, and someone else, well, what is that? And I say, well, you know what I'm trying to do? And Charles Cope says this. I'm looking for a voluntary solution instead of a coercive solution. You know, and you know, you sort of think innovatively, and you're always looking for ways where the problem can be addressed short of one party initiating coercion against another. And that's a definition of government. They have a monopoly of force in a certain geographical area. Back there?
I got the email. I guess the one I'm interested in, I'm starting to read through the Schoolhouse Rock. And I guess my question is how did Kincaid dig itself into this intellectual rabbit hole, for lack of a better word?
Right. That's a very good question, because the problems at Kincaid could be worse than a lot of other peer schools, but I hadn't studied it. I think there's two things. One is self-selection, where a lot of your high school teachers, particularly in government, history, you look at the backgrounds and the money that they make versus someone in business, and they have a little reform in them. They're not sure if the system has really rewarded them. Now, this is getting very ad hominem, and I'm probably I am uncomfortable talking about it. But to those intellectuals that are teachers, and it's a 10-month-a-year job, it's a part-time job, okay? And for a lot of teachers that are critical of capitalism, high school teachers, I would like them to go to a Monday morning staff meeting in a business where to see how tough it is. The business world is tough, and there's not a lot of complacency and, okay, we've done it, we've arrived. And there's too many academics that are just comfortable in what they do. But the very profession of teaching and being an academic is really the result of free market capitalism, the wealth of capitalism that endows positions and pays the salaries of the students. So you naturally have a lot of teachers that are left of center. That's one problem. And the other problem is it became reinforcing, where they just, I'm not going to mention names here, but these folks all think alike, and they choose who their next faculty member is going to be, and there's just a whole lot of groupthink. And this is why there needs to be a variety of hires in this intellectual diversity to really shake up this groupthink. David.
I think you mentioned in terms of spontaneous order, and what a difficult concept that is to get your arms around. It's counterintuitive to think that stuff is self-organizing, but really, if you look at biology and ecosystems, you can see the example of self-ordering happening all the time in the world of biology. And there's an excellent clip that, I don't know if it's out of print now, by Michael Rothschild called Bionomics, in which he carries the analogy of the business world to the area of biology and ecology, and how that's a much better model for the economy than the old-fashioned machine overheating. We're having to stimulate the economy with whoever's there pulling the levers and pushing the buttons to do something to the economy, when in fact it's much more like an ecosystem and will only cure itself by self-ordering the elements that make it up.
And maybe even something like the climate has some mechanisms in it where it doesn't spin out of control. The global warming debate, a lot of the alarmists believe human influence on climate, it'll ruin everything. Just a real pessimism toward nature, and that's where the very positive feedback effects come into play.
Like the microbes that cleaned up the BP oils.
Right.